Hi everyone, this is Robert and welcome to IDG Live. Yes, we have made it. This is the finale of season 2 of House of the Dragon. And as always with these pre-show live streams, we're a few hours beforehand if you're watching live, just because people always ask. The episode will air in 4 hours time from now, which my time is 2 a.m. in the morning, Central European time, 3 a.m. if you're on the east coast of America, that is 9 p.m. So I will be talking here for a couple of hours or so. Then everyone's got a little bit of a time just to take a deep breath before the show itself starts. What I will do is I will start by giving a bit of an overview of the episode. We had episode 7, and then we'll be moving on to answering the questions that I've got some from my patrons, and I'll pick up as much as I can in the chat as we go along. As I understand it, there was quite a major leak this week of this episode. This doesn't affect the spoiler policy on this channel. We're always the same here. Show spoilers are not okay, book spoilers are fine. So I will happily talk in terms of the show. I will happily talk about what has happened on the show. I will happily talk about all the things that we know, official things like trailers, stuff like that. I will not talk about any of the leaks. I will not be mentioning them in the slightest. If you want to talk about them, there are plenty of places you can go to if you wish. Book spoilers, however, are absolutely fine. We will talk about what the book's been out for a while. We will talk about what happens next in the books. That may or may not be what happens next on the TV show. They have started to veer away from it in certain ways, so we can't be 100% sure. But that's what's going on. That's the first thing to say. The second thing to say is that this is, as have all of my live streams during this season been, this is a charity live stream. And if you've been holding out all the way through, you've been watching all of these, and you just wish to show a bit of appreciation for the show, for me, for the moderators, whatever, I would humbly ask you to consider donating via, there's a donate button somewhere around on your screen. We are collecting in aid of international rescue who go into war zones, places of human catastrophe, and they just work with the people who need the help the most. What do they need at that particular moment in time? Do they need shelter? Do they need medical care? Do they need food? Whatever it is, then that's the first thing. Second thing is that they try and get people back on their feet. The longer term things, the boring stuff that doesn't get the headlines, to actually try and help people move forward with their lives. So they do amazing, immense work. It seems like incredibly appropriate given what House of the Dragon is covering, and the way every single live stream we talk about who is suffering the most, it's the small folk. These are the people in our world who go out and help the small folk in war zones. So I'm not going to do a hard sell. I would just say that if you would normally do super chat, if you would love to show your appreciation, if you're just kind-hearted enough and can afford it, please do give as generously as you can. Okay. That's all of that done and out of the way. Let's start by giving a bit of an overview of where we are at on the show. So episode 7 really brought everything, I think, to quite a good point for this last episode. I think we've got a clear idea on roughly where we're going to be. We don't know all the details of what's going to happen, but we know roughly what the stage is for what we've got. So let's start with Harrenhal. Now, Damon in Harrenhal, it's been quite a slow burn character arc, it has to be said, but last episode we did have, this is episode 6, I should say, we did have a breakthrough for him, in as much as all of this has been working. He's been having these visions, he's been having Alice Rivers talking to him, he's been having problems doing the things that he wanted to do, amassing an army, and finally he's there, able to break down in his weird dreams that he's been having and be there for his brother. And then also he's able to ask for help. He can't get this army. He thought he could just go to Harrenhal and command an army, and he has not been able to, but he asks for help from Alice Rivers. And Alice Rivers basically says, give me 3 days. 3 days go by. Lo and behold, the logjam is over. Old Grover Tully is dead. And we're told in Show World what this means is that the Tullys can now move in. People will follow their lead. Oscar Tully, young Oscar Tully arrives. Remember, earlier in the season, he arrived and Damon was quite condescending and also suggested things like, hey, why don't you just go and kill your granddad? He didn't get off to a good start with him. Oscar Tully basically shows wisdom and political skills well beyond his years. And he makes it very clear to Damon that, yeah, they will go with what they have promised, what House Tully, what everyone else in the Riverlands pretty much had previously sworn to do, which was give their support to Rhaenyra. So that's going to happen. But this is not, or should not be interpreted as them supporting Damon personally. And that is the key thing here, is he looks at him. He looks him in the eye and calls him, what's the word he uses? Loathsome. That's the word he says. He calls him loathsome, and basically all the River Lords agree, and he gets Damon to sacrifice the person who's been working with him to be committing atrocities, war crimes, and he makes it very clear, okay, these guys support me, they support Rhaenyra, we accept the fact that you are here on behalf of Rhaenyra, so we will follow you, but this isn't out of loyalty to you. So Damon has his army, but he's in a kind of a humbled place. And we get one final for this episode, one final vision, which is of his brother, Viserys. And it's quite a quiet scene. But Viserys basically says, I never really wanted the crown. Do you still want it? And then we cut away. And this is, I mean, I have to admit, I'm getting a little bit frustrated by this. This is not the first time, it's not even the third or fourth time that they've done this with Damon, where he's about to answer a question, he's about to give us some vital bit of information, and they just cut away. So we don't get to see his response. But the implication is that he is now at a place where he is not driven to become king personally. So he is shifting back towards Rhaenyra during this time. Moving over to Rhaenyra, and the shift, it would appear, is not equal. He seems to have come back towards Rhaenyra. Rhaenyra seems to be going down a very different path. We see her, first of all, picking up where we left off on episode 6. She confronts Adam of Hull, who is riding Sea Smoke, and she basically just says, what do you want? You're there on one of House Targaryen's dragons. I am your queen. What do you want? And he just bends the knee. He doesn't have to be persuaded. He says, I want to serve. I'm on your side. All is good. Now, this understandably surprises her, but also reassures her, it would appear, because she then gets this kind of nudge from Messalina saying, we've got one bastard. Adam doesn't admit where he's from. He doesn't admit his parentage at all. We know that he's Corlys's son, but he doesn't admit that. Corlys himself does not admit that later in the episode. So Rhaenyra is kind of left with she doesn't really understand how dragon bonding works. And the one thing that she has discovered from this is that the dragon chooses. That's the indisputable thing from this episode, is that Sea Smoke, they offered up somebody to Sea Smoke as a potential rider. Sea Smoke went, nah, and then went off and found the person that Sea Smoke wanted. So she's now taken this idea or internalized this idea that the dragons themselves decide. And so she then gets this idea, or Messalina puts this idea into her head, that rather than looking for other noble families, which was her original idea, she should just look for Targaryen bastards, because there are a lot of them out there. And so she's quite easily, it has to be said, it doesn't take much, she's quite easily persuaded, and she sends Linda Massey off to King's Landing to find some Targaryen bastards. And Linda Massey gets smuggled in and wanders around. Or in fact, well, Linda Massey is already there, so the message gets smuggled into her. Linda Massey wanders around talking to people who claim to be, or people say that they are, Targaryen bastards, gathers 30-something of them, puts them on boats, sends them off to Dragonstone. When they arrive, however, it becomes very apparent what a big thing this is. In the books, it's moved through quite quickly, and it's on the instigation of Charis. This is very different here, because first of all, we get, pardon me, Lord Celtigar, who is basically saying, "Well, no, this is just not the right. It's not the done thing. It should not be allowed," and we can kind of dismiss him quite easily. He seems not to be really supportive or with it. But then we get the dragon keepers themselves, who say that it is an abomination. And they quit en masse and say they don't want anything to do with this. And then Jacaerys comes to her and says, actually, this wasn't in the book, but I really liked this, because he would have thought this. He comes to her and he says, "You do realize, everybody thinks that I'm a bastard, and I don't look like a Targaryen. And one of the key things that has persuaded people that I am a proper Targaryen, and therefore it's right for me to be next in line, is the fact that I ride a dragon. If you allow other Targaryen bastards who might look very Targaryen to ride dragons, that kind of undermines my claim to the throne after you. Just imagine one of them comes in and says, right, well, I'm actually the bastard son of an earlier king. Where does that leave Jace? Because if everybody thinks that he's a bastard son of a later queen, what if this other person's got a bigger, fiercer dragon? It leaves Jace's claim in a lot more precarious situation than you might first think. Rhaenyra doesn't really know what to say to that, it has to be said, but she carries on anyway. So we have to accept the fact that this is a huge shift. I say it went through quite quickly in the book, it went through quite quickly on the show as well, but this is massive. All the way through the Valyrian freehold, thousands of years, all the way through the Targaryens. At this point, the Targaryens, after the Doom of Valyria, they were 100 years on Dragonstone. They've been 130 years here, so another 200 plus years. It's been very clear. Some houses can be dragon riders, everyone else cannot. There is a monopoly here. The Targaryens have the monopoly over dragon riding. No one else is allowed to. The moment you allow other people to be able to ride dragons, that the whole basis for what the Targaryens being different, the Targaryens being special, is undermined. And you start to wonder why, or whether they should be the ruling power. So this is huge. And Rhaenyra kind of, it's not that she doesn't understand these things, she thinks it's worth it, because she's increasingly being driven by the idea that she has to get this war over and done with very quickly because of Aegon's prophecy, because of the Song of Ice and Fire. So we get the message going out into King's Landing, and we have two people we've long suspected are bastards, one of which Ulf has been telling everybody he is. And so the obvious thing happens is that the invite goes out and he's there. He's like, actually, it's not, maybe I'm not as sure as I first thought, but he gets pressured into it. So he goes onto the boat. Then we get Hugh Hammer. Now, Hugh Hammer, it turns out he hadn't mentioned this to anyone, not even his wife, but he says, the bastard son of Sarah Targaryen. Now, she was the daughter of Charis, the Old King, the king we saw right at the very beginning of season 1, the king who was there before Viserys. And she got into a number of scandals and left Westeros, ended up in a pillow house in Lys, made her fortune, and stayed over in Essos. But we're told that she had a number of children, and apparently Hugh was one of them. Now, Sarah and Charis, the Old King, the friction that was caused by everything that happened there caused Charis huge amounts of grief. And as it happens, Vermithor, the dragon that they go with here, Vermithor was Jaehaerys's dragon. Why is that important? Because obviously when Rhaenyra goes in with all of these potential dragon seeds and she calls forth Vermithor, she kind of communes with Vermithor for a little moment and then just says, so he's hugely dangerous and it's up to him to choose. And then she just goes away and leaves it to the people to basically get burned. The person who Vermithor chooses is Hugh. Now, why? I think there are two clear reasons that seem to be there. The first one is this familial link. He is the grandson, it would appear, of Jaehaerys, who rode Vermithor before. And he is the son of Sarah, and there was a very strong link going on there. And we're told one of her sons was the spitting image of Jaehaerys. Is that possibly who? I suspect not, but maybe. So that's the first thing. There is definitely some kind of familial link, which seems to have been the thing which worked over there with Adam and Seasmoke. Seasmoke seemed to have thought, well, I want another rider. I'll pick the half-brother of the person who used to ride me. So we've got the familial link. And the second is that everybody is running away screaming, clearly terrified of Vermithor. And what was the one instruction that we actually got from the Dragon Keepers to Stefan Darklin? Don't show any fear. So that clearly is important. And what does Hugh do? Well, he sort of leaps in front of Vermithor, saves someone, and then shouts at Vermithor and basically says, I'm ready. Go on, kill me, if that's what you want to do. And that seems to have been the thing which kind of stopped Vermithor in its tracks. So the bravery, the honor, and the familial link, and these things seem to have played a big part in why him. Ulf, meanwhile, gets knocked down off that platform, goes wandering off into the caves, and stumbles into the lair of Silverwing. And he puts his foot into what seems to be like a cache of dragon eggs. Silverwing appears and so kind of like nudges him with her snout and kind of goes, yep, you'll do. Why? Well, I don't think we're going to get a full answer on this one. Again, there's probably a familial link there. It's possible that it's like, oh, there are my eggs. It's possible that Silverwing just kind of liked him and his smell. It's also possible that what we're looking at here is that actually every dragon's different. Silverwing, we're not even in the book, we're not told that Silverwing killed anyone during the Red Sowing. So perhaps this was just Silverwing going, okay, so we're getting new riders? All right, you'll do. Maybe Silverwing's just not fussy. So we're not told. I suspect we won't be told. This is one of the things is that dragon bonding, George R. Martin tells us in the books, we're going to be hearing a lot more about dragon bonding in future books. But here on the show, Rhaenyra has basically gone, I don't know. And they've shown us a couple of things, but it's still a mystery. So she now has 6 dragon riders, which is a significant advantage over Aemond, Team Green, Aemond and Vhagar. Now, Vhagar is bigger and more impressive than any of the dragons that Team Black have, but Vermithor is also pretty massive. Vermithor, we're told, is the next biggest dragon. Plus, we've got a whole load of other Silverwing as an ancient dragon too. We've got Cyrax, we've got Sea Smoke, as well as a couple of other smaller dragons. They basically could take on Vhagar, all of them together. So they now clearly have air advantage. But the number for each and the equation is kind of shifting. After every episode, it kind of shifts. So we've got 6, but we've also got Daemon on Caraxes. That would make 7, but as I say, we're still slightly uncertain about Daemon's loyalties. We've got down in Old Town, we get the message that Prince Daeron, this is the youngest of Alicent and Viserys's children, he is now riding his dragon to Sarion. So there's another dragon there for Team Green. Plus, obviously, we've got Dreamfire. Can Aemond persuade Helena that she should be riding Dreamfire into battle? It seems unlikely, but Dreamfire is there and is a very old and very powerful dragon. And then we get this final dragon in the Vale. Now, Rhaena, they head off down to the docks. The idea of her and the 3 younger Targaryens head off down to the docks. They're going to catch the boat, the Gay Abandon, which is the same name as the boat they caught in the book. And then they will sail off over to Quentos, where they will have safe harbour over there. But she clearly decides, no, she's heading off. She's looking for the dragon. Nobody seems to notice. Nobody seems to stop her. She seems to be completely okay about leaving the 3 younger Targaryens that she was left in charge of, but she heads off into the wild. The working assumption is that the dragon out there is going to be Sheepstealer, who is the other dragon who is claimed in the Red Sowing in the books. So we can talk a little bit about that a bit more if you want, but that's the broad situation we've got there. So over in King's Landing, where we started the season, Team Green were very much in the ascendancy. They were in King's Landing. They had all of the trappings of power. They had their person literally sat on the Iron Throne with Blackfire, the Sword of the Kings. He's been crowned in front of the people. Everybody can see them as the people in power. And Team Black were not united. Team Black did not seem to be following what Rhaenyra wanted. She was hesitating about actually going to war. So Team Green had every single chance here. But over the course of this season, mistake after mistake, Aemond is now in charge, and he, if you remember, he has now basically sent everyone away. He sent Thailand away. At the same time as here in this episode, we get the Lannister army who have basically said, we're not going to go into combat with a dragon unless we've got a dragon on our side, so we're not going to go any further. He has taken Alicent and said, no, you've now been kicked off of the council, you don't belong here anymore. Criston Cole he sent off with the army, so Criston Cole has gone, and Larys he's kind of sidelined. So Aemond is now quite alone. And Alicent, basically in this episode, she's got nothing else to do. She just goes out into the countryside, and it may or may not have been clear when you were watching it, but basically what we're told was that what happened was that she went out into the water. This is a theme for her this season, going into the water, being surrounded by it. This is kind of like a spiritual, religious experience for her. She is there floating, not quite sure what to do. She looks up, she sees a bird up there in the sky. This makes her think of Rhaenyra, and she thinks, I've still got a role here to play. So she swims back to the shore. So I had thought on first watch through, I have to admit, I thought, that's it, Alicent's not there anymore. Alicent is now heading back. From what we've been told in the behind the scenes little mini videos, she's decided she's got a role yet to play in this, so she's coming back to King's Landing. Larys, he's been quite quiet this season, it has to be said, but he has attached himself firstly to Aegon when he was king, made himself useful to Aegon. Then Aemond took over and seemed to start to try and ingratiate himself with Aemond, but Aemond was having none of it. So Larys has attached himself to Aegon, and he starts to say a few quite interesting things. First of all, he gives them this kind of little pep talk about, you're crippled now. People will look at you different. I understand this because I was crippled from birth. Look at my foot. People underestimate me. They'll underestimate you. I mean, it's quite inspirational and empathic stuff. Whether or not he actually feels any of that is a different matter. But he also says that the reason why he's been pushing for him to Aegon to be better, quicker, was because he thinks that they've not got much time. He doesn't think that he's going to be able to just lie in that bed for very much longer. They're going to have to get out. They're going to have to leave King's Landing. Why? Well, the implication is pretty clear, I think. He can see what is happening. And this does lead us to one of the things that has been very, very noticeable this season when you just take a step back and look. It's the really, really poor security in King's Landing. The most glaring example was this episode, because you get Alinda Massey wandering around King's Landing in a bright red cloak, underneath which she's wearing a top with the Massey sigil on, so nobody can miss who she is. She's going up talking to people who look like they're Targaryens and saying, hey, Rhaenyra here is collecting people to go and become new dragon riders. The whole city's talking about it. It's getting passed out from pub to pub, inn to inn. 30 or more of them escape out of this city that's theoretically on lockdown, get on the boats and sail off over to Dragonstone. And Larys, we're expected to believe, knows nothing of this and doesn't say anything about it. there are other moments as well earlier in the season. The amount of times people have snuck into King's Landing this season. We had Damon arriving for Duncan for not Duncan Egg for Blood and Cheese. Blood and Cheese getting into the Red Keep without any real problems at all. We had Rhaenyra and Stefan Darklin both managing to get into the King's Landing and then get out of King's Landing again with no problems. Linda Massey has gone in. The messenger bringing a message in for Linda Massey has arrived. These 30-odd very Targaryen-looking people have managed to. The King's Landing has been leaky this season. And there's no two ways around it. Security is not good. Now, there are two options here, really. Either Larys is really bad at his job, or he's actually quite good at his job, knows what's going on, and is just not passing that information on to the powers that be. My instinct now, given the fact that he's there in this episode saying, we've not got long, we need to hurry up, we're going to have to go, is that he knows. He knows, he's just not passing this on. So he's got a longer term plan here, which is short term, sticking with Aegon, but he's got a longer term plan here, which is not anything to do with supporting Aemond. So Aemond does discover that that Rhaenyra has new dragon riders when Ulf on Silverwing just kind of flies over King's Landing. I've not got a question on it, but a lot of people have kind of speculated. I mean, he clearly doesn't have huge amounts of control of the dragon. At that point, this seems to have been his first dragon riding experience. This isn't, as far as we can tell, Rhaenyra sending him over to scare anyone. That doesn't seem to be what she was wanting to do. This seems to be either Silverwing of her own volition flying, taking Ulf over to King's Landing just because, I don't know, she likes King's Landing, or more likely, he goes to King's Landing to show off. They won't be able to see who it is, but to show off to all of the people who doubted him in King's Landing. Look at me, I'm a dragon rider. And then he goes back. But anyway, Aemond obviously sees this, gets onto Vhagar, heads over to Dragonstone and sees what it is. So, sees what's going on. So, this all builds us up to, I think, quite a clear idea of where we're at the end of this season. So Daemon, his arc is broadly there. He's got his army. He reached his point of contrition and understanding. He is now moving back towards Rhaenyra. Rhaenyra, however, is moving away from him towards Mysaria, yes, but also towards being more independent. She does not need him in a way that she seems to have kind of subconsciously felt that she did before. So she's kind of moving away and also going from a position that she started with, which was very much, I don't want to have a war. If I do have to have a war, I want it to be as limited as possible, to now she's reading up about Visenya, the great warrior queen. She's picking up swords to think, how do I look in a sword? I have to be more warlike, to changing centuries, millennia of monopolistic practice by the Targaryens to gain a short-term advantage in this war. So she has shifted hugely in a different direction. She's got a big advantage now in the number of dragons. Daemon presumably coming back onto her side, and King's Landing largely undefended. So expect that to be the sort of the focus of this episode, but we have around the edges things that are going on that it'll probably be season 3 before we get to the full impact of these things. But we've got Tywin Lannister trying to get the Triarchy to help out with a big navy. we've got this army, the Old Town army, the Hightower army, which is now starting to move, and that has a dragon of its own. We have the Lannister army going on. Let's not forget about the Northern army, which Jace managed to get passage for them to be heading down south. So the armies are starting to come together. So we've had a series of, I wouldn't say phony war. Battles have happened, but the real battles will be joined next season. Okay, so that's the situation that we are in. Let's have a quick flick through the chat. Jason Keane, thank you very much for the donation. I hugely appreciate that. Andrew Kay saying some of the dragons like to test their new riders right after the bond on House of the Dragon. Aemond was taken on a wild ride by Vhagar. Perhaps the same with Elf. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's. I think you hit the nail on the head. The dragons do seem to like to, when you claim them, you have to underline this by holding on tight while the dragon goes for a bit of a circle. Kilgore Tully saying Alt Shift X put us side by side of Ulf flying Silverwing and Slim Pickens riding the Nuke and Doctor Strangelove. It's too perfect. It's a great film, Doctor Strangelove. Aeneas saying no way Aemond could see that far. I think this is one of the suspend your disbelief moments. I think that he could see the dragons with the fact that they were out there. I think he could probably read between the lines that they must have new riders. All right, let's go. Catherine Firstith saying in Fire and Blood, the gold cloaks are pretty much Daemon's allies. Yeah, that's something that's not really come through here on the show, is that, yeah, in the books, then Daemon was loved by the gold cloaks when he was their commander. And Team Green go through a couple of efforts of trying to purge the gold cloaks of people who might support him, but they basically fail miserably. So even when we get to this point in the story, then there's a significant number of gold cloaks who are very much team, not just Team Black, Team Daemon. Lawrence Gill Variety Channel saying it's interesting how the small council seems to keep getting smaller under Aemond. You can't send everyone away. It reminds me of Renly saying a man without friends is a man without power. Yeah, and this is one of the noticeable things here about Aemond, and we've talked about it several times. They're showing this echo between Aemond and Daemon, and part of Daemon's arc, indisputably, this season, is that he thought that he was a natural leader. He's the person. Everyone will follow me. They find it hard to follow Rhaenyra, but they will follow me. And he finds that when he gets to Harrenhal, maybe it's not as easy as he first thought. Maybe people aren't going to follow him. Maybe the one thing he's trying to do just isn't going to work. And that's the same that we get with Aemond, is that Aemond, even back in season 1, he's there. I would be better at this than Aegon. It should be me there. And now he is there. You start to immediately question him and say, you're sending away people. You've managed to alienate your biggest ally, House Lannister. And you've managed to alienate your spy master. You've managed to alienate somebody who potentially would be on your side in the council, your mother. This and Kristen, you've sent away the army, and Kristen Cole. Basically, he is divesting himself of potential allies. So this is not as easy as he thought it was going to be. Right, let's go to questions from my patrons. And I've got a question first from Blitzen saying, "Hi, Robert. Hope you're doing well." I am, thank you. So far, it seems that Hugh has been portrayed in quite a positive light compared to his book counterpart, although we have seen glimpses of his aggression and violent side. Um, Although we have, I'm finding it a little hard to see how they're going to turn him from what he is now into what we see in the books. Do you think it is possible they're going to tone him down a bit for the show, or do you think they'll try and push him in that direction through some means that escape me at present? Unrelated, but it's actually my 20th birthday, so let's all hope for a solid end to the season. Well, happy birthday. I hope it's a fantastic name day, and I hope it's filled with all the wonderful things in life. So, yeah, I hope you have a good day. In terms of your question, um, Hugh, yes. So Hugh is not described in huge detail in the books. It has to be said. He's got a physical description, and then we have to try and work our way through, based on what he does, what his character is. And he seems, certainly by the time, spoilers again, this is your spoiler warning for what happens in the book. Probably something similar will happen on the show, but we'll have to wait and see. So in the book, then after doing what he's told, basically, to start with, he gets to Tumbleton with Ulf, where basically they're facing down this army, the Hightower army that we've been talking about. The idea is to face them down and stop them, but they turn cloaks and they go to Team Green. And then Hugh goes, "Actually, you know what? I think I'd be a good king." And then he gets himself crowned. And so this seems very different from the character that we've had or we've been given here in House of the Dragon, who's a family man. He cares about and loves clearly his wife and his child. But I think what you said was the starting point here. We have the fact that he has got another side. He's not just there trying to look after his family. When he hears there's food, it's coming from the docks, he starts heading down towards the docks. He grabs somebody, a completely random person, doesn't know them at all, and says, "Where's this food come from?" This person's got an armful of food. "Where's this food come from?" And he says, "Down there on the docks, keep going." And then what does Hugh do? Does he go down there to the docks, try and get some food? No, he punches the person, completely random stranger. He punches him and grabs the food from him and then heads back to feed his family. Now, we can, I'm sure, understand that he cares about his family, but this definitely shows a different side to him. This is somebody who can be ruthless. This is somebody who can prioritize his own needs over somebody else's needs. He didn't know. Maybe the person who he punched had a poor, starving family themselves. They probably did, to be honest. But he didn't care. So we see a different side to him there. But if I had to guess, I think we've been given the clue already about what's going to turn him, which is that his wife has said that her brother is in Tumbleton. So he will head off, has headed off over to King's Landing, not King's Landing, to Dragonstone. He's got his dragon. He has said the reason he's gone there is because he couldn't protect his daughter, and now he's going to get a dragon, and then he'll be able to protect his wife, which seems quite a... I mean, I'm sure that's part of it, but there also seems to be a bit more to it than that. But then he gets this dragon. What's he going to do? Well, if he's told by Rhaenyra some point next season, go to Tumbleton, that's where the Hightower army are, you're to go over there and stop them. What if he goes over there and he finds, and this is what happens, Tumbleton is a horror show. This is the worst degradations of war happen at Tumbleton. What if he finds that his wife has been killed, or she's still alive, but terrible things have happened to her? I think we will suddenly see that anger come out in the same kind of guy who could punch a random stranger and take their food from them, and has now got the most angry, furious dragon there is. So that, I think, is where we see this turn. And the bond between a dragon and a human, we don't understand all of it, but it seems to go both ways. Vermithor is very angry, and Hugh seems prone to violence if he can't get what he wants. So you merge them together, it's quite a dangerous combination. Okay, so we've got Gina Z saying, thank you so much for your in-depth coverage this season. You're very welcome. I'm looking forward to hopefully seeing Rhaenyra and Daemon reunite today. In an interview, Emma Darcy expressed regret that they and Matt Smith had so little screen time together this season. How do you see their relationship evolving going into the end of the season and into the next season? So I touched on this when I was doing my overview of episode 7, but I think this is absolutely crucial. Daemon had been thinking about claiming the throne for himself. How seriously, we'll never find out, but he had definitely been thinking about that. He'd been thinking that he was the best person to be the king, and basically he would claim the throne, and Rhaenyra could then, like, if she wants to, she can come to him. He wasn't really thinking about her or her claim at all. Now he seems to have moved to the place where he's realized, actually, maybe I'm not the best person for this. And he's also realized, and this was the starting point of those visions, is how he's always run away. He's always run away from his responsibilities and left the people he cares about in bad positions when they needed his support. He run away from Viserys. He's run away from supporting his daughters, and he's run away from Rhaenyra. So here, if he has gone through this character arc, we should see him with some kind of contrition. Okay, I'm going to go back. I'm going to be responsible now. I'm going to do what I should be doing, which is go back to Rhaenyra and bend the knee and say, this person's the queen, I'm on her side, and just try and patch up their relationship in some way. So that's where his arc, exactly how he does that, we don't know, but that's where his arc is heading. Her arc is not heading towards him in the slightest. She's got herself a new level. We don't know where the Masseria thing's got to. There was just that one kiss, and then we've not seen any more since then, obviously. But she is treating Masseria as her closest advisor. She's taking her advice over and above the advice of literally everyone else, including her own son. So she's moving closer to another person. She's moving away from being the person that she was when she and Daemon were together, and she's got stronger. It's a subtle thing, but if you look back through the episode, she's got stronger in the language that she uses when she's talking about Daemon. She starts out, it's quite, I don't know how long he will be gone. Maybe it's 2 weeks, maybe forever. He has to go his own path. And it starts out as, I mean, I wouldn't say understanding, but it's quite, okay, he's going off and doing his own thing. But where we're getting to now is that I have to assume he's not on my side. She's moved completely away from that initial position to a position where she assumes that he's against her. So her arc is taking away. It's like they're there. He's coming in towards her, but then she's veering away from him at the same time. Now, in the book, they do come together in King's Landing, but Daemon leaves quite quickly. Now, how are they going to play that in the show? I don't know. But Daemon sort of gets together with Nettles, who may well not even appear in the TV show. So I think they've kind of left themselves with a bit of wiggle room, but him being there by her side to start with in season 3, I should say, and then moving away does seem quite likely. Have a quick flick through the chat. Comically High saying Damon has actually had the most character growth in the whole show, more than Rhaenyra or Alicent. Yeah, I think. Well, we'll see. We'll see where he lands on it because it's all theoretical at the moment. But I wouldn't disagree. Certainly, he's had more. There have been some characters who've seemingly had some character growth, but it's kind of underplayed. Like Kristen Cole, for example. I don't know where they're going to go with this, but he was changed by what he saw at Rook's Rest. He's completely humbled by it. He seems to be just thinking this is no longer, I'm no longer relevant at all in this. The way he talks in the small council is really kind of downbeat. He very quickly accepts what he's told to do, and it's just like, okay, all right, I'll go and do that then. He has had quite a lot of character development, but yeah, Damon, if it sticks, Damon's is the most radical shift out of everyone, because he goes from someone who just does his own stuff, whatever he wants to do, trying to get as close to power as he can, to somebody who is actively there relinquishing power and supporting somebody else to be in power. That would be a massive shift. Chassor, if dragons don't roam, then what is going on with Drogon? Okay, so this is in relation to George R. Martin's blog post that he came out with a couple of weeks ago or so now, where he gave us this huge lore dump about dragons. And the thing that he seemed particularly, other than the number of legs dragons have in heraldry, which is a particular bugbear of his, he's talked about this several times before. The thing he really seemed to get worked up about this time was dragons roaming, which seems to have been a reaction to this episode with Sheep Stealer, who we're told was on Dragonstone, and then decided to fly over into the Vale of Arryn and sort of roam around, forage for food there instead. And George R. Martin said, "My dragons don't roam. They stay where they are. They nest. They have this small area where they try and get their food from, and that's it." And his argument was that if dragons roamed, then everything would change in his world. The Targaryens had dragons in Dragonstone for a very long time. Vermithor, for example, was 30 years, I think, without a rider, just sat around in Dragonstone. Silverwing would have been even longer, and they didn't roam. They stayed where they were. If they had, then they'd have gone off and been eating sheep and open potentially to people trying to claim them across the Seven Kingdoms. And they wouldn't be there when the Targaryens wanted to bond with somebody else. And even more importantly, in his mind, if you go all the way back to the Doom of Valyria, the whole point about the Doom of Valyria is it killed all the dragons. There were a handful of dragons away from Valyria because they'd been flown away. But all the dragons basically were in Valyria. So that's how all the dragons died. So he says, if you mess with the law, then it all comes apart like tissue paper, was the phrase. It was quite strong language, it has to be said. So he clearly wasn't impressed. So your question here is what's going on with Drogon in the book? So in the book, we get Drogon who refused to be imprisoned in Meereen, basically, and so hung around the environs of Meereen and 8 sheep and things like that. So far, okay, that seems to fit in with what George R. R. Martin said. Drogon didn't go far. But then he flew in to the arena. Dany got on his back, and then Drogon flew off into the middle of the Dothraki Sea. Now, George R. R. Martin was very clear that dragons will fly off to other random places if they are being ridden there. It does appear that there is an element here where sometimes the rider is not in complete control, particularly on that first ride. We've already noted this here on the show. We had Silverwing and Ulf, who were flying around. Ulf didn't seem to have huge amounts of control. It's fair to say that Aemond didn't seem to have huge amounts of control the first time he was flying Vhagar. That seems to be what's going on here, is that Dany was riding Drogon, but there seemed to be, it wasn't that she intentionally went that way, it's just some things about their bond and connection took them to a different place. For Ulf, it was to King's Landing. When Aeria Targaryen got onto Balerion the Black Dread, that they seem to have gone to Valyria, the ruins of Valyria. Here, to the Dothraki Sea. So that seems to be what it is. George R. Martin's very clear. They only roam away if they are being ridden there. And Dany she may not be in huge control, but she was riding it. Okay, let's go. And Karl Karsnark saying, anyone who has ridden a horse knows that control can be fleeting. If they want to run, they will, and there's not much you can do. But hold on, ask me how I know. How do you know, Karl? So yeah, I think that the point. I think the point is clear that if the dragon is being ridden, then it will potentially go. If it's not being ridden, it will stay roughly where it is. Question from Lady Vaughan Strauss saying, hello. In Game of Thrones, Season 7, Episode 1, Sam, while looking for secrets to the Long Night, is shown reading a book with an illustration of the cat's paw or prophecy dagger on it. The text possibly attributing the blade to Aegon the Conqueror and the Targaryen's penchant for decorating with dragonglass. However, there is no mention of any prophecies. Do you think the cat's paw prophecy dagger was recorded in a very old book before or after the Dance of Dragons? Well, it's an interesting one. So we don't know. And this is one of those things that we don't know the extent to which this is a show-only thing. The Aegon's dream, we're told, came from George R. R. Martin, or at least the initial idea about it. And Ryan Condal was quite clear making that distinction about the fact that it's not that George R. R. Martin wrote this bit. He didn't write what the bit of prose was that Viserys passed down to Rhaenyra. He, as far as we are aware, he did not say about that prophecy dagger, the cat's paw dagger. That strikes me as being a show thing, for the simple reason that they are very keen within the show to be linking the show together with the main Game of Thrones show wherever they can. And if they've got this dagger, they decided they would use it, and it's like this, you put it into the flames and you can read the message kind of thing. And so my take is that what is written on that, the exact thing that Rhaenyra read out, was something along the lines of, from my blood will come the prince that was promised. So it's not actually a particularly detailed prophecy, this one. This isn't like the thing that Viserys said to her. This is just like a one line, and it's talking about the prince that was promised. The prince that was promised appears to be, and its sister prophecy, Azor Ahai reborn. And when I say sister prophecy, what I mean is in the book, when Maester Aemon and Melisandre are talking about Azor Ahai, they use it interchangeably with the phrase "the prince that was promised." So as far as they are concerned, this is the same thing. It's just that it's preserved in different ways. So my best understanding is that the prince that was promised element is not new. That's not a new thing that Aegon came up with in his, or was given to him in his dream. What this is to say, is to link that pre-existing bit of prophecy into the Targaryens, to say it's the Targaryens who are the inheritors of that prophecy. So I hope that kind of makes sense, and that means that even even if the idea that there's something on that dagger knife gets lost, it doesn't matter. It does not matter, because the heart of that, the prince that was promised prophecy, is already known elsewhere. Mithrandir saying, do you think the civil war would still have happened if Rhaenys had been queen? Yes, I do. I think the thing about the Targaryens is that every generation they have a succession crisis. Sometimes it leads to all-out war, sometimes it's not as obvious, but every generation. After Aegon, then his son Maegor took the throne by force. The next generation down, Rhaenyra, he took the throne by dint of the fact that he had the most supporters, away from the person who was the named heir. After Viserys, then we had, after Jaehaerys, we had the Great Council, during which we're told that the two sides, Corlys and Daemon, they were both amassing armies. Every generation we get a succession crisis. If Rhaenys had been there ruling, then maybe, and I'm sure she would actually, maybe she'd have been a great and wise queen. Maybe she'd have chosen a good successor that everybody loved, but that would not stop the problem. There were always going to be problems with the succession, because this is what the Targaryens are like. And there was, I think there was another question I saw. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Let's go to a question from Arasla. Aemond in the show appears to have taken up Blackfire, the sword Blackfire. So do you think it will be lost along with Dark Sister in the show? And to follow this up, could the show canon use this to explain the absence of the two swords in Game of Thrones? Assuming they chose not to do a show on the Blackfire rebellions, they can leave the swords' fates open just in case they ever decide to do a Blackfire rebellion show. I think the answer has to be no, because they are, in a way, already doing a Blackfire Rebellion show. Dunk and Egg. So you get to Dunk and Egg 2, for example, the Swan Sword. All of the background to that is the Blackfire Rebellion. You cannot do that story without understanding something about the Blackfire Rebellion. And 3 is literally, they get there at the genesis of a potential Blackfire Rebellion Part 2. So if you're going to do that, you cannot go into the Blackfire Rebellion in any length without covering or using the word Blackfire. And the moment you're using the word Blackfire, then you're getting into, why did Daemon take the name Blackfire? Because of the sword. I think they have to. So yes, Aemond is, he seems to have taken it for himself, but his body is recovered in the book anyway. His body is recovered with the sword Dark Sister through his eye, and I think we now add on the show with the sword Blackfire still in his scabbard or something along those lines. So I think that's what we're going to find, is that he may well have it, but it will be recovered. As for the show and what they use those two swords for in the future, I think yes. They've not made a huge thing about the sword Blackfire. It has to be said. They've shown it a few times, and Aegon kind of held it aloft, but they've not made this a main part of the legitimization process. Now, that means that they can quite easily just have it reappear. Aemond takes off the sword before he goes off flying on a dragon. It's quite simple. They can do this in a number of different ways. I also think, and this is kind of quite a blast from the past, Dark Sister, I still think that on the TV show, the original Game of Thrones TV show, they did give us a nod to Dark Sister. They did this a few times, kind of like a nod to the book fans. You will remember that scene where we see the Tower of Joy, and we're just about to cut over to Lyanna lying on the bed, and in the camera just pauses for a couple of seconds to stare at a sword which is propped up on the edge of the bed, and that sword is Dawn, which we as book readers know is hugely important and impressive, but they decided not to really do anything more than the TV show. But what they did was they just wanted to give a little nod to the book readers. So they said, okay, just pause on this cool looking sword for a little while. And I think they did something similar with Dark Sister. We've had confirmation from George R. Martin that Dark Sister did go up to the wall with Bloodraven, and by implication went north of the wall with him, and by further implication is in Bloodraven's cave with Bran and Bran and Maura. Now, when they escaped on the TV show, you see Maura on the way out. They're running out, and she just pauses. She sees a sword propped up. She pauses, she looks at it. The camera takes a moment, and she grabs the sword, and they go. Now, they don't do anything with that sword. It's not a thing. I suspect that was them saying, yep, this is a little nod to the fact that that sword is Dark Sister, and in the book, probably it's going to be coming back into play at that moment in time. Okay, let's do a very quick shout out to the moderators. Moderators do a fantastic job on this channel. If you're watching this live, then you will probably know there have been some leaks of the episode. We don't cover those leaks on this live stream. The moderators are the people who make sure that they don't appear in the chat. And also, just as importantly, they make the chat a welcoming place for everyone, which is hugely important for me. Somewhere where we can all just talk about the things, the TV shows and books that we love. So if you're there in the chat, could you just show a little bit of love to the moderators? I would also personally like to show a little bit of love to my patrons. Patrons, I prioritize your questions because I cannot do what I do without your support. So thank you very, very much. And also thank you to Jackson 3. Welcome to channel membership. Great to have you on board. Let's go to a question from Lady Pushkins saying, hello, Robert and Dan. I'm here in Cumbria for a short break. Where do you think this would be in Westeros? Maybe Greywater Watch or the Riverlands? I'm terrible at geography, but I love a nice map, particularly the A Song of Ice and Fire ones. Okay, well, if you're a British person, please feel free to drop what you think down into the chat. Don't have to be a British person if you know British geography. For those who do not, that's absolutely fine. Cumbria is, if you imagine England, it's sort of like the northwestern bit of England. If you happen to know where Manchester and Liverpool are, it's sort of a bit north of them, but south of Scotland, south of the Wall. So it's actually a really beautiful part of the world. The Lake District is there, which is gorgeous, and also a few fine towns or cities like Carlisle as well. So right up there, south of the wall, but definitely up in the north. Where does that? I mean, there is no cut and paste here. It has to be said. George R. R. Martin doesn't. Yes, we're loosely based. Westeros is loosely based on particularly Britain. Also, if you're looking just at sort of the maps, he's kind of like turned Ireland upside down and attached it to the bottom of a map of Britain. He's taken inspiration from a number of different places, but all those caveats in mind, clearly the wall is Hadrian's Wall inspired, so north of that is Scotland. Nowadays, Hadrian's Wall isn't the exact border between England and Scotland. The border is actually a little bit further north than that, but roughly north is Scotland. If you go down to the south, you'll get King's Landing is very clearly London, the capital, etc., etc. The Westerlands, mountainous, easy to defend, feels quite Walesish. The Riverlands feels a bit like the Midlands. The north is, and House Stark is York, because we know this is the Wars of the Roses. So that is House York, which is obviously in Yorkshire. Cumbria, I mean, there are no massive cities there, but I would say if I had to pick a place, probably sort of the western part of the north would be what I would say. I would say sort of the Rills, and then going up to kind of like the Bear Island, we're told is incredibly beautiful. So I think that that's the kind of bit of the world that I would say it's kind of reminiscent of. Let's have a just quick flick through the chat. Let's see what other people. Odd29 saying Dawn is definitely not inspired by Britain. You're right. Levac saying Northern Riverlands seems to be closest to Northern England, whereas the North seems close to a mix of Scandinavia / Russia / Canada, with Britain mixed in. And Jared Rodriguez saying Lake District is the Riverlands for sure. Pantomime Horse saying, but going by topography rather than location, I'm going to say the Rills. Yeah, Cumbria can be the Barrowlands. Yep, I would do that. Yeah, I think so. There are quite a few people saying the Riverlands. I mean, I personally think it's a bit north of that, but David Cavazos, welcome to channel membership to you too. Thank you very much indeed. For those who don't know about channel membership, the best way to support this channel, if you wish to do so, is through Patreon. But if for whatever reason you don't want to do Patreon and you do wish to support this channel, thank you. You can just sort of click, there's a membership button down there somewhere. Thank you very much, Anonymous, for donating. This is, to remind you, this is a charity stream. I would love you to investigate the charity. I think they do fantastic work. Let's go to question from Rassler. Otto seems to have gone AWOL, and disappeared, and it's implied he's not returning any messages yet. For him to have his book fate, he will need to return to King's Landing soon. What do you think will draw him back? Will it be Aemon's summons? It seems unlikely since he's apparently out of contact range. Or will he return for another reason? Or could they even be planning to change his book fate? Okay, so his fate in the book is that he is at King's Landing when King's Landing falls. And he had previously said, if Rhaenyra gets the throne, then I'll be the first to die. And he's right. Rhaenyra comes in. The first person they execute is Otto. That's his fate. So in the book, if the show were to follow the book, then he should be in King's Landing and about to die. They took him out from there. And that strikes me as a deliberate decision. It's not If they were to take him out and then just sort of bring him back, that would feel a little bit weird because they could have just not shown him much, unless they wanted to make sure that he wasn't anywhere near being able to help out Aemond with maybe a little bit of wise advice. I don't know. What I felt at the time, and I think is still feeling quite likely, is that he's said he's going down to the Reach. He initially thought about going back to Old Town. That's the base of House Hightower. Then he thought he should probably go and talk to the Tyrells, because they're the Lords Paramount down there of the Reach, and they've not. I mean, to be fair to them, they have got a bit of a regency going on themselves. Their ruler is a small child, but he thought he should probably go in there and try and get them on side. So what I thought originally was that the idea was he'd go down, he would leave the show for a few episodes, and then he would reappear there as a POV character down in Old Town, helping out Darren, who is then going to be quite a significant part of presumably season 3, leading the army, the Hightower army, up. So we have, yes, this is Darren leading it, but we've got this character that we know, who is Otto, there as well. I still think that feels about right. That seems like a very sensible way of going about this, rather than introducing a completely new army without a person that we know in it. We get somebody that we know there, and he can die later on. There will be ways for him to die later on. The bit about him not being in contact is intriguing, because that's been repeated a few times, and it implies that things have not gone to plan. He has headed off down that direction, but it has not gone to plan. So we're kind of left uncertain, which leaves open the possibility that he could get captured and brought back up to King's Landing. I would find that a little bit disappointing. Now I've thought about the idea that we might get a bit more of Rhys Ifans' acting, which I'm a big fan of Rhys Ifans. I think he's done a fantastic job with Otto. But yeah, I don't know. So that's they've left it deliberately vague. It may well be that we have to wait all the way until next season to find out exactly what's going on with him. But they've taken him out from King's Landing for a reason. They've kept him alive for a reason. Uh, Orlando Ben Mitra saying, Aziz from History of Westeros theorizes that Otto's role will be expanded to play Book Ormond Hightower and die poisoning Ulf. Yeah, I mean, it makes absolute sense. I have to say, it's the kind of thing that if they were to take him down to lead or head up that Hightower army, then they could easily just replace another Hightower with him. Aegon Dragonborn, House of the Dragon wants us to connect Rhaenyra to Dany. Does Rhaenyra's extreme belief in her divine purpose have parallels to Daenerys' breaking of the wheel obsession? Is this a red flag about her? Well, yes, they're very keen to draw parallels between these two characters. What I would say is quite interesting is Emma Darcy, the actor who plays Rhaenyra, talks or has talked in the behind the scenes video about that Stefan Darklin thing, and said this was Rhaenyra's one of the first signs of Rhaenyra's increasing fanaticism. So that is a role that route that she is going to be heading down. So we have to brace ourselves for the idea that this character, who was not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but quite sympathetic, is going to go down what we sometimes say a darker path. She is going to go down a more fanatical route in some way. 444 saying, hi, Robert. Hello. as it was reported that George R. R. Martin mentioned 7 more series, 3 live action and 4 animated, are in development. In addition to House of the Dragon and Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, what ideas can be in development? For live action, probably still 10,000 Ships and Aegon's Conquest. I'd love to see Robert's Rebellion or Blackfire Rebellion, but I doubt that they will do that. So what could be the third one? Young Corliss has been switched to animation, and the second could be Yi Ti. I would love to see things about Jaehaerys and Alicent. What other ideas for animated series could there be? Yes, so this is a story. George R. R. Martin is in England at the moment, and he was 2 days ago, I think, in Oxford. And he was at an event, and there was Q&A. I wasn't there. I know a couple of people who were there, and they say that he had questions and he was asked about spin-offs, and what he said, and this was apparently, it was clear that he meant in addition to what we already know about House of the Dragon and Duncan Egg, there are 7 more things in development, of which we're talking 3 live action, 4 animated. So this is an update on where we were. The numbers of what is in development shift quite a lot. Occasionally we get random updates. We know that 10,000 Ships is one of them. Like Miriam Martell story is one of them. They're now on the 3rd potential showrunner and 3rd potential set of scripts for this, which tells me 2 things. Firstly, they haven't got it right. But secondly, there is clearly a will to do this in HBO and George R. R. Martin, or they would, after the second one, they'd have gone, right, this isn't working. But there's clearly a will to do that one. They're just not there yet. Then we had Aegon's Conquest, which was not announced by HBO, but one thing that they often do just to kind of gauge the temperature of the fandom is they have some favorite tame journalists who they will plant a story with and say they're in early stages of developing Aegon's Conquest as another spin-off. And then they kind of watch the reaction. The reaction was very positive. It has to be said from the fandom. I think we can safely say that this is what they're looking to be developing, probably as the next big live action thing to follow on from House of the Dragon. So those are the 2 we know about. There have been others that have been in development. The Jon Snow show seems to now be, or the word was not used, but Kit Harington has come out and basically said it's shelved. It's put to one side. It's that they decided they're not going to be moving forward with it at this time. So unless something's changed there, that it's not that. And we've also had the Corlys Velaryon show, which was being developed. This is young Corlys, basically, and that's now going to be an animated thing. And I'm pretty sure that is going to happen. George R. R. Martin did a big blog post basically defending animated features and said, and this thing that we thought was going to be a big budget live action is actually now going to be animated. And it's all okay, guys. So that's clearly one of them. Yi Ti, we've still not had much details about. Somebody ages and ages ago, we're talking 4 years ago probably, somebody leaked that one of the animated features that they're looking at developing was set in Yi Ti. And it's broadly all we've got on that. We've not heard that it's shelved, but we've also not heard it's being taken forward. Now, just a word of clarification. When we say there's 7 things in development, this doesn't mean that they're going to happen. None of those 7 have been greenlit. They're all before that point, probably some of them quite a long way before that point. They're in a position where they're paying, or basically they've they're willing to put time into getting a showrunner to develop scripts, to discuss ideas, take some time from George R. R. Martin to have his input. That's where they're at with these. And only when they're absolutely convinced that they're in the right place, that's when they might greenlight them. So what might these other things go? Well, we don't know. My instinct is that in terms of the live action stuff, at least they probably want to do things that George R. R. Martin has already written about. That's noticeably been what the first two things they've done is the Dance of the Dragons. He's written about that in Fire and Blood, and he did two novellas basically before that, which he expanded into Fire and Blood. So they're not standalone ones, but he's done the background work on that. And Dunk and Egg, obviously, we've got the stories. So my instinct is that whatever live action thing we're talking about, in addition to those two that we've already got there, is likely to be something that George R. R. Martin has written about. And I think your guess is as good as mine. As to the animated things, I do wonder whether they might go down a Valyria route, an old Valyria one. That was an initial idea that they had that did get shelved, but maybe somebody's come back in with another idea. Let me know in the chat. I'm sure you've already been saying this, but let me know what you think they might be developing, or what you'd like them to be developing. Carl Karsnark saying the snow show is a no-go. Yep, that's pretty much it. Andrew K saying outside of Conquest, Nymeria, Corlys, and UT, I suspect the others are much more tentative ideas kicking around. I think you're probably right. Other than one of the animated features, we've previously, the numbers that we've had previously, we used to know what was being developed quite well, and the only one which was a mystery was another animated one that we knew nothing about. So the implication is that there is a plan for an animated feature series, whatever it is, that has been in the works for 3 years or more. It's just that somehow, miraculously, that one hasn't leaked. We haven't found out about that yet. Andrew K saying the Conquest, I suspect, will be the next project greenlit, given the attached writer's posts on socials and interviews that he has given. Yes, I think I'd probably agree. I think that's looking likely. Also, it's been very noticeable that House of the Dragon has gone quite big on referencing Aegon the Conqueror. We've got Aegon's Dream. We've got the references. Rhaenyra looking up Visenya. We had in the background, we had Meraxi's skull. They've got lots of different references across to the Conquest already. So it's almost like they're kind of warming up the audience to it. Let's go to a question from Catherine Furseth. If we go real tinfoil, and in the absence of Bloodraven, who wasn't yet born, should we blame the Weirwood Network for promoting a specific bloodline, Daemon's, and outcome at the end of the dance? If so, why? Alice Rivers' motivation and favoured future outcome are unknown to us, but we speculate that she in some way works on behalf of the Weirwoods. So what if they had already at this point a specific bloodline in mind from which came the prince that was promised? Remember possibly seeing into the future. Alice certainly didn't warn Aemond of his coming death, but let him be killed. Result, Daemon's children were the only survivors of the dance. What do you think? Yes, so this is a thing, book spoilers. This is a thing that you may or may not spot when you're first reading it, but when you think about it, it becomes glaringly obvious. There's a lot of Targaryens at this point in the story. There are 4 Targaryens who survive beyond the initial year or so of the Regency. And those 4 Targaryens who survive are Aegon, Viserys, Baelor, and Rhaena, Daemon's 4 children. Everyone else dies. So the line of Targaryens that follows all comes from Daemon. So this is quite staggering when you think about it, and has to be intentional on George R. R. Martin's part. Now, the question here is this deliberate? We think that if you go forward in time a bit to when Bloodraven was around, the amount of Targaryens came in hugely, and lots of suspicious deaths. Lots of them, if you include the Blackfires, that you can specifically lay at Bloodraven's feet and say, yeah, he actually literally killed those people. Might they be doing the same here? I kind of like the idea that they are doing this. Now, the only thing that I would say, and this is very speculative, and it's the kind of thing I might write a video on at some point, but we do have a child who emerges who is apparently a Targaryen, who we don't know what happens to, which is the child, allegedly, of Aemond and Alice Rivers. What happens to that child? Now, perhaps they're just killed. We don't know. But what if that child is just kind of secretly dropped into a Riverlands household, like, say, the Blackwoods? That would inject some Greenseer DNA into the Blackwoods through Alice. That would inject some Targaryen into DNA into them, and of course, coming from the Blackwoods, who comes from there 3 generations later, 4 generations later, Bloodraven. So Bloodraven comes on one side from this comes down from Daemon, and on the other side, it comes down from this comes down from Alice Rivers. So I find that an intriguing possibility. You say this is before Bloodraven. If I were to put my when in doubt blame Bloodraven hat on for 1 second, I would say yes, but Bloodraven can at least see back to this point in time. From when he's hooked up to the Weirwood network, he can see back in time through the Weirwood trees. So he will have been able to see everything that happens here. Now, can he change that? He says quite strongly that he can't. But I think we probably can very clearly say that, at the very least, Bloodraven was aware of what was going on for when he was around and could do stuff. Let's go to Andrew K saying, I think it's interesting to think that the Hightowers got a bit of an injection of Targaryen blood via Rhaena after the dance as well. Yeah, interesting. Mitra saying Bloodraven caused the dance. When in doubt, blame Bloodraven. I mean, that really would be taking it on to the next step. But the Dance of the Dragons definitely did lead to a big pruning, if that's the right word, of the Targaryen family tree. Let's go to Howland's little sister saying, I've enjoyed season 2 very much. I can't remember, but I know you can tell me, when will Bloodraven make his appearance in the story? As we're on this already. The year 175 is when he's born. We're the year 130-ish at the moment in the story. Bloodraven is on his father's side. His father is Aegon IV. Aegon IV is the son of Viserys II, who is the son of Daemon and Rhaenyra. So Bloodraven is Damon's great-grandson. So we're not talking a huge amount of difference if you're just going in generations. So we're talking 45 years before he gets born. But again, we have to say the whole point is Bloodraven can see back into the past. So he won't appear in this story as a human wandering around until as an adult for 60 years or so, but he is watching it as we are. Let's go to Rabbi Mitra asking if I'll do an on-the-spot live stream when the casting is announced for Bloodraven on the Dunk and Egg show. I think I'll be very excited. The thing is that Bloodraven doesn't. They could shift this, but Bloodraven does not appear in book 1, so he should not appear in season 1. Now, they might change this, who knows? But that there's no book reason why he should be cast just yet. Let's have a quick flick through the chat. Lady Pushkin's saying, I like the idea that the ink is dry, is not keen on changing the future thing, risky with the paradox element. So the ink is dry is this idea that you can't change the past, basically. And what we've seen is that the kind of the blanket things that Bloodraven, particularly on the show, it has to be said, but also a little bit in the book, that Bloodraven says that you can't change things in the past. I tried, I couldn't do it. That is not exactly right in the book, also on the show. So the big answer to this is, but this is what we've got going on with Hodor. Bran goes back into the past on the show. Whether it will be exactly the same in the book, we'll have to wait and see. In the show, he goes back in time, interacts with Hodor, links him to future, and basically we create this kind of closed time loop. So the Hodor of the past is experiencing what happens in the future, and he is saying, hold the door, Hodor, which is something that happens in the future. So the past is affected by what happens in the future, but in this kind of closed time loop. So that's on the show the big thing. In the book, it becomes apparent that Bran can call out to his father when he's seeing through the Weirwood network, and his father's like, who's there? Now, that's just not very powerful at the moment. Didn't change anything ultimately, because Ned just carried on with what he was doing. But it did show that you can interact with the past in some way. So George R. R. Martin is kind of tiptoeing around this idea in the book. We're not going to get, I suspect, into a world where you can just go into the past and change everything. I think we are going to end up with this kind of closed time loop idea in some way. I think the Hodor thing may well be what all of this is kind of leading up to, but we're not going to end, I'm pretty sure we're not going to end with something where Bran learns amazing time travel issues, goes way back in the past, solves everything before it ever became an issue, and the whole story never happened. That's not what is going to happen here, but we will find that the past can be slightly interacted with from the future. Let's go to Jar208. When does the episode come out? In just over 2 hours, about 2.25 hours time. Ranabir Mitra saying, salutations, Robert and Dan the dog, GGMU and Modlove, absolutely. let's go to. You said some very kind words, which I won't read them all out, but thank you very much. Saying, I want to ask about Damon and his potential arc as season 2 comes to a close. You said that by season 4 or 5, there needs to be some pivotal moment incoming in his arc, which makes him have to eventually accept that he has lived too long. Considering that Alice is an agent of the old gods in Harrenhal, and she has had a whole season with him there, could she become pivotal in making him come to this realization? If so, what can she do to make Damon come to this realization? Yeah, so this is an interesting one. So she has already said, you'll die here. So, and this is quite a, I mean, I wouldn't say a departure, but this is a degree of certainty about what happens in the future that we're not used to from the books. This is a big shift. But she basically says, you will die here. And she shows him that she's incredibly powerful. She shows him that she knows what's going on around, that she knows what's in his dreams. I can certainly see. I was looking for, and I'm sure you're quoting me reasonably accurately from earlier live streams. I certainly imagined that what had to happen was he was going to go through this character development arc to get to a position where he thinks, that's it, I've done everything now. This opens up the possibility that actually he comes to the conclusion that it is just his time. That Alice Rivers has told him that it's time for him to die, and he has done everything that he feels he needs to do. So perhaps we don't need this big arc. I mean, I would be quite disappointed if we don't get a big arc that brings him around to the point where he's there going, actually, yeah, I'm done. If they do just make it Alice saying now, okay, now's the time to die, go and do that, I would personally be a bit disappointed, but we'll see. They've opened up the possibility. Let's go to Catherine Furseth saying, where do you think the show is taking Laris's arc? He's tough to read and doesn't seem to be working for one specific side other than himself. He allied himself with Alicent, killed his own family, supported Aegon's claim, sits on the Green Council, wants Aegon to get stronger, but failed to warn Aemond of the coming threat. Where will his allegiance be placed in the coming episode and season 3? Yeah, so he is deliberately set out as this mysterious figure who we don't know whose side he's on. I think it's probably fair to say for the next 2-3 episodes, we can say he's here with Aegon, getting him out of King's Landing, because that seems to be what this was all leading to. He's basically said, you aren't going to be able to stay here. You're going to have to move at some point quite soon. So he will be saving Aegon's skin. Then in the book, what happens is he kind of drops him off at Dragonstone, where Aegon does a coup against the people who were there to start with. What remains of Rhaenyra's Team Black, who are over there. So he does that while Larys heads back into King's Landing and sort of does sneaky stuff behind the scenes. Until we reach a point where a few of the characters think all of this has to stop. The war could just keep on going, and people will forget what it was all about to start with, because it's just about the latest grievance. But this has to stop, and he and a few others kind of get together to make that happen. So that would be a big shift for him if he gets to that point. And he also, incidentally, ends up at this I've lived too long position. He could have accepted an offer to go up to the wall, but he basically says, no, I'd rather you kill me. Which ties in with this idea that he's linked in with the Weirwood network. And maybe he's wanting to be sacrificed so that he can just join up with the Weirwood, give the Weirwood network all of his memories and experiences. Erin Sunx, do you think Laris will sneak Aegon out of King's Landing by the end of tonight's finale? If King's Landing falls, he's got to get out of there. So, given the fact that they set this up last episode, I can't see a way around that. Let's go to a question from Rassler saying, considering the civil wars and struggles that Lady Jane Arryn had to face during her time, why do you think she made the poor decision to name Joffrey Arryn her heir? Did she not foresee the conflict this choice would cause? And if she was determined to make the choice, pardon me, should she have done a better job at removing the rivals who could challenge her? Okay, so we've met Lady Jane Arryn in the TV show now, and she's in the book. She comes across relatively similar, very clever, very competent, and she says during her time she has 3 attempted coups against her. 2 of them are by her cousin, who goes by the name of Arnold Arryn, who thought that he should have inherited rather than her. Now he goes a little bit mad. He puts him in the sky cells, and this, incidentally, this is a kind of an echo across to the whole Rhaenyra, can a woman inherit Rhaenys, the queen who never was, kind of thing. This is somebody who did inherit and did have challenges, but succeeded and stayed in power. So she's this kind of counterpoint. Now, she died of a nasty cold, we're told. I can't remember exactly how old she was, but she wasn't very old. And she lived long enough to write a quick last will and testament, in which she said, that guy Arnold, who's been trying to take my throne, he's not going to inherit, nor is his son or any of his heirs. And she names this guy called, sorry for the slightly sore throat there, she names this guy called Joffrey, who is, I think, a 6th cousin. So quite distant, but it would appear the next closest in line, if you forget Arnold and all of his. Now, why didn't she prepare Joffrey for this or set things up? Well, she died quite quickly. She was not expecting to die, and she died quite quickly. That is the short answer to this. Her priority was to make sure that the person that had tried to claim it from her did not succeed with her death, and she gave it to somebody who, I mean, ultimately did. I wouldn't say succeed, but he came through. So yeah, it's not as simple a matter of, well, she should have done more succession planning. Yes, she should have done more succession planning, but her death was unexpected, and she did the best she could in that short period of time. Thank you, Carl Karsnark. Grimpy Spingle says Maegor faked his death, is using sorcery to keep himself alive, and is secretly the rider of the cannibal. Well, that's great tinfoil. I love that one. Let's go to Lady Vaughan Strauss. Actually, this is the last question from one of my patrons. So I've got a few more minutes left, so I will pick up questions in the chat. But let's do this one. Lady Von Strauss saying, hello, Robert. Hello to you too. I hope you and everyone out there have a pure fun time tonight. In comparison to the lush weirwoods as seen in other godswoods, the upper portion of the weirwood tree at Harrenhal appears sickly, almost underfed, with smallish withered leaves on spindly branches, while a burly, undulating root system bursts from the earth all around it in stark comparison. Typically, the roots of a tree mirror the branches, but this one doesn't. If this were a tree in the real world, this style of growth would be indicative of an exceptionally old tree, which has experienced several cycles of severe drought. Being that this magical tree is a beautiful set piece inspired from the story, what would you say are some of the reasons for its peculiar appearance? P.S. Laird Vaughan Strauss sends more of his love for your reading of one of his absolute favourite stories, The Shadow over Innsmouth, and The Well-Told Tale, or to directly quote my jolly laird, go on ye. To very briefly pick up on that last point, thank you very much. I appreciate it. If you do not know, I have got a sister channel where I do audio narrations of what I consider to be the finest science fiction and fantasy stories ever written. So you'll get the absolute ancient classics, like Dracula's, The War of the Worlds, things like that, as well as things like H.P. Lovecraft. And yeah, I really enjoyed reading that story, actually. Shadow over Innsmouth. I did get quite a few compliments on my the accent I used for a drunken New England sailor, which means I found my niche. This is I'm happy to lean into it, and I'm happy to accept job offers from anyone else who wishes to employ me to be reading the role of a drunken New England sailor. I say job offers. I do that. The Well-Told Tale is a pure passion project. I make no money from it whatsoever. I just want people to have access to these stories. But anyway, there's a link somewhere to that. So the weirwood tree. So let's talk about the weirwood tree. In case you missed it, they have confirmed that the face. This is an Easter egg, obviously. The face on that weirwood tree in Harrenhal is modelled on George R. R. Martin's face. It's a really cool little thing there. What can we say about what it looks like? I mean, I think the first most obvious thing is that it's right on the edge of the God's Eye Lake, and it is kind of, its branches are sort of heading out towards the Isle of Faces. So that's the kind of feel we've got for it. First of all, technically this is Harrenhal, but really it's close, it's connected with the Isle of Faces, which we kind of view as being the heart, the hub of the Weirwood network. As for its roots, the working hypothesis that many of us have got about the Weirwood network is that we call it network because it's all connected. The roots go underground and they join up all of the Weirwoods. So the idea that we've got these big, craggy roots, which sort of go a long way out from the Weirwood tree, and we see them in the castle, and they've told us, the showrunners told us, that this was very much a part of the design when they were coming up with the design for Harrenhal, was that it should look, we could see the roots of the tree there breaking through the castle, as if the Weirwood tree is trying to reclaim the castle. So I think that's great, but we should not be surprised it's got big and impressive roots if we are right about the idea that the Weirwood network is all joined up underground. I mean, one other thing which kind of nags at me is that Harrenhal's big and looks big on the TV show, but it should be so much bigger. The Godswood is, I think it's 70 acres in the book. Like, this is massive. It's an actual proper wood. Whereas on the TV show, it's basically, this is just like a little backyard for the castle. There's no other trees. It's just a tree. So that's a small gripe. As for the look of the weirwood tree, I've already said it seems to be straining to be getting to the Isle of Faces. It doesn't look 100%. It's not fully blossomed out and healthy looking. But that I feel fits with the castle, which doesn't, it itself is not, doesn't feel good. So I don't have a problem with this. I think that the design looks good. I do like the lots of roots thing. That works for me. The idea that um, the upper portion is underfed is an interesting point, though, because how do you feed a weirwood tree? It's got water. It's right by the side of the river. It doesn't perhaps get much sunlight. We don't see much sunlight going on in Harrenhal at all. But weirwoods seem to love sacrificial blood. Now, are we to say that it hasn't had much sacrificial blood recently? Yeah, probably. But is that enough on its own to justify it? Well, looking a bit spindly. Well, no, because Winterfell won't have done. We have just a complete digression here. That one of the thoughts about Winterfell is that, and the Weirwood Tree is that Ned Stark, whenever he personally does all of the executions in the north, and he doesn't clean his blade until he gets to the Weirwood Tree, and then he kind of washes it off into the waters, which is almost like a blood sacrifice to the Weirwood Tree. It's just kind of remote. So, in Harrenhal, has it not had that many? Maybe not recently. But then, what are we to make of the sacrifice that we'd see in episode 7 when we get Daemon chopping off the head of Blackwood? That feels like a sacrifice. Might we see the Weirwood Tree looking a little bit more healthy? Possibly. Okay, let's go and have a quick look through the chat. Professorus saying, I really hope we get to see the cannibal at some point. It would be a shame if he was cut. Yeah, so the cannibal is this wild dragon on Dragonstone who a couple of people try to bond with during the Red Sowing, but fail miserably. And he's never been ridden. Nobody really knows how long he's been there. He's called Cannibal because he will happily go and eat other smaller dragons around there. Should we see him? He's not plot critical, it has to be said. So if he doesn't make an appearance, I'm all right with that as a change. They could even mention him and we don't get to see him, and that will be absolutely fine because he doesn't really make much of a appearance. He has one appearance in the distance, really, and that's all his contribution. And at some point, he dies. So, if they're looking to cut a dragon, and they've got a lot of dragons and a lot of dragon names to remember, if they think, well, we'll keep this one back, then I can understand it. I'd love to see it too. Absolutely love to, but I can understand it. Zero V Ranger saying, "Oh, will Rhaenyra's sudden belief that the gods are behind her and are guiding her path be the reason she starts to make more and more questionable decisions that will turn the small folk against her?" Well, this is the thing that or one of the things that I'm really intrigued by for next season. Assuming next season is Rhaenyra ruling King's Landing, because it goes wrong. She rules very strictly, and she puts Lord Celtigar in charge as Master of the Coin. He taxes people a lot, and basically people turn against her. So, are they going to show that on the show? Are they going to show her misruling? And when I say misruling, we can lay a lot of the blame at someone like Lord Celtigar, but she was queen. She appointed him, and ultimately the responsibility has to lie with her. There are extenuating circumstances. She didn't have any money because Team Green had taken all the money already, etc., etc. So she was given a bad inheritance there. But I will be intrigued to see the extent to which they try and make it look like it's not her fault, or they go down the route that you sort of suggested here, that she just gets more fanatical and less caring about people. That would be the braver route, I would say, given what they've done with most of these characters, which is to make them more relatable. They've certainly tried to make Damon more relatable. They've tried to make Alicent more relatable. Even Otto, they've taken and sort of shown us a little bit of a side of him that makes us go, yeah, maybe he's not all that bad. So this will be intriguing if they take a character who starts off being quite relatable and take them down a dark path, then that'd be quite brave, and I think, probably quite like it. Hilgor Tully, thank you very much for the donation. Constantine Tranos with some tinfoil. The cannibal is immune to Dragonbinder and other Valyrian sorcery. He came to Dragonstone with an earlier Valyrian family and was too single-minded, so he was left to be on his own. Well, no other dragon riding Valyrian family was at Dragonstone, so far as we know. The Valyrians stayed in Valyria, but the idea, I mean, this was one of the ideas that they had for where Cannibal came from, and that he was there already. So that thought is there as a possibility. The immune to Dragonbinder and other Valyrian sorcery. Yeah, it's good tinfoil. We simply do not know the answer to that, because the Targaryens don't have Dragonbinder. Fernando Benitra, the channel The Dragon Demands claims that for Aegon's conquest, the conquest section will be a movie, post which the Sons of the Dragon arc will be a 4-season series ending with Maegor. Yeah, I mean, I've seen that video. I don't get to see many videos. I did see that video. I thought it was really interesting, very thought provoking. I don't think it's based. Feel free to correct me, anyone. I don't think it's based on any actual information from HBO. So it's educated guesswork as much as anything else. If we do have Aegon's Conquest, then one of the things that seems to be possible is this idea that they would do, as you say, they would do as a film the actual conquest, and then what follows as a TV show. This does map on with the approach with House of the Dragon. So House of the Dragon is covered in Fire and Blood, but also there were 2 novellas which covered the ground in reasonable detail. With Aegon's Conquest, or the aftermath of Aegon's Conquest, he did another novella. The third of those novellas was The Sons of the Dragon, and that's the title of one of the chapters in Fire and Blood. So we have got that extra layer of detail. Quick flick through the chat. Lady Sophia Valarion saying, good evening, everyone. Enjoy the season finale. Thank you very much. And Carl Karsnark saying, I'm a bit over the everyone and everything is grey shtick. Pure evil absolutely exists in the world, and folks like Mao, Stalin, etc., prove it. Don't be deceived. Yes, I mean, I'm not going to talk about real world stuff here, but it definitely is a thing that they've done on House of the Dragon to try and make sure we don't have. I mean, the only one who they haven't tried, I think the only character they haven't tried to soften a bit is Larys so far. So maybe they will give us a little bit on him at some point, but generally speaking, almost all of the other characters, they've tried to show us a bit more rounding to the character, even including some characters who, in the book, were very clearly not good. Okay, this is I always say that I try to keep these ones to about 2 hours because I want to give everyone enough chance to have a little break before the show. So I won't, I think, because this is the last episode, so I won't be doing a pre-show episode next Sunday. But on Thursday, I will be doing a breakdown live stream. I've been doing open Q&As on Thursday, but let's make this a summary for all of House of the Dragon. So Thursday, normal time, we'll be looking not just at the season finale, but the whole season of House of the Dragon. Between now and then, I've got a normal set of videos coming out. A few people have asked about Rings of Power. Yes, I will be sort of shifting more towards Lord of the Rings content over the course of the next 2 or 3 weeks as well. Okay, so all that said, if you thanks again, moderators, and thank you, patrons. I hugely appreciate it. If you are watching this live over on X, then hi, I see you. I interact with the comments here over on YouTube, but I see that you're there, and I hugely appreciate it. And if you are watching on Twitch, there's probably only 2 of you, but hi, good to see you as well. If you are watching this back later on YouTube, then appearing somewhere around here is a link to other live streams that I have done. Appearing somewhere around here is a link to my Patreon, which is the best way to support this channel if you so wish. A final plug for the fact that all of these live streams through season 2 of House of the Dragon have been charity live streams. If you wish to show your appreciation, if you are feeling generous, if you would just like to help some of the people in the world going in war zones who are absolutely 100% innocent and just need help, there is a link down somewhere on your screen now. So I would hugely appreciate that. So thank you very much. Take care, everyone. Enjoy the finale, and I will see you next Thursday.